Okay, welcome to the Block Island Maritime Institute's first Tuesday talk of 2021. My name is George Davis, and tonight we're pleased to offer this talk in partnership with the University of Rhode Island's Cooperative Extension Water Quality Program and with the support of the Island Free Library. BIMI's mission is to provide educational programs and maritime activities, including marine science and marine heritage, for residents and visitors on Block Island. And tonight's well water safety workshop for private well owners should be of great interest to many of us that have private well water here on Block Island and around the state. Our speakers tonight are Alyson McCann, the Cooperative Extension Water Quality Coordinator at URI, and Joe Bertherman, a graduate assistant with the Water Quality Program. But before I start, a little bit of talk logistics. Please use the chat box to ask your questions during the talk. There will be no questions answered during the presentation. They may be answered in the body of the presentation, but we won't be taking live questions. And with that, I'd like to introduce Alyson McCann to lead us in this webinar. Alyson?
Hi, thanks, George, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm just going to take a moment and share my screen. And again, welcome to the slide to the workshop tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to work with the Block Island Maritime Institute. And I want to give a big shout out and thank you to both George and Valerie at the Institute for being the masterminds behind hosting the program and doing all the background work for making this happen for us tonight, as well as the Island Free Library for their support. And also my colleague Joe Bertherman tonight will be, many of you probably have, you've received emails from Joe. He'll be monitoring the chat tonight, as well as doing some follow-up emails with you that I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. So one of the things that Joe did was send you out a copy of the slide presentation, which ideally you can have in front of you, make notes on it. As George mentioned, many of the questions I think will be answered in the body throughout the slide presentation. And then if anything, comes to mind as I'm talking or at the end of the program, please again use the chat, and Joe will use that to help get some questions answered. Tonight we're going to be talking about protecting, testing, and treating private drinking water wells. Okay. The source of the water in our private well is groundwater, and groundwater is a part of the water cycle. This slide here demonstrates or illustrates the basic water cycle as it moves around the earth and over the earth's surface. And groundwater is part of that. It starts, if you will, as surface water, whether it be a wetland, a pond, the Atlantic Ocean, Block Island Sound, where that water can evaporate, move up into the atmosphere, condense, and return back to Earth as precipitation. And when it falls to the earth, some of it will run off in storm water and run off back into a surface water body. And some of that precipitation will infiltrate down through the soil profile, where it can become groundwater, where it can be recharged. So I often think of groundwater very much like a battery, like our car battery. In order to be a functioning supply of water, it needs to be recharged. We put our wells down into the groundwater so that then we can pump that groundwater into our homes for our use. throughout Rhode Island, because I know there's some people here that are both on the island and then throughout the Rhode Island mainland, our private wells are installed in one of two geologic formations underneath the surface of the earth. They can be placed into bedrock, or they can be placed into sand and gravel deposits. What this slide here illustrates is that the well that's numbered 1 here is placed down into sand and gravel. Typically, sand and gravel wells are more shallow than a bedrock well, simply for the mere fact that our sand and gravel deposits sit on top of the bedrock. So the bedrock will be deeper below the surface of the earth than the sand and gravel. So one of two underground formations that we put our wells into. And I'm going to talk a little bit later in the presentation about well water construction and the types of, specifically the types of well water construction that go in that are placed into sand and gravel wells, okay? Sand and gravel wells as well as the bedrock well. The quality of our private well water is affected typically by one of two things. First, what we're doing in and around our own home. And what I mean by that is how we use, store, and dispose of potentially harmful chemicals to groundwater and hence to our drinking water, the water in our drinking water well. So how we use gasoline products or hobby chemicals, paint chemicals around our home, how we store those products. Are they covered? Are they kept away from the well water source? Are they stored inside where they're not exposed to the elements and rainfall and snow melt and those sorts of things? How we store them, how we use them, and then how do we dispose of them? That's a very important point, properly disposing of potentially household hazardous chemicals. And I'll talk about that a little later in the presentation also. So our well water is affected by what we do, maybe what's happening nearby, and also naturally occurring substances that exist in the soil and in the rock that the groundwater is moving through. A couple of examples that I'll give you that are common water quality concerns in Rhode Island well water are iron, a naturally occurring mineral, not a health concern. I call it more of an aesthetic concern where it can cause staining of fixtures, staining of laundry. It can impart a color, like a reddish brownish color of the water. It can discolor laundry. It can leave stains in our water fixtures, like our toilet bowls. And radon, which is a naturally occurring gas that occurs in our, in our bedrock. And then can also get into our groundwater. And I'll talk a little bit more about radon later in the program, but a couple of examples of what's occurring naturally. So not only what we're doing, but just what's occurring naturally that can affect the water our drinking water quality. So let's look at an example about what's happening in and around our home. I like to use the example of a septic system because most of us who are on private wells, I'm a private well owner, as well as I have a septic system to manage my household hazardous waste. So what I'm going to talk about just briefly in this slide example is a conventional septic system. Okay, I'm not going to talk about any of the advanced treatment septic systems that some of you may or may not be familiar with, but just basically how a conventional septic system works, okay? So initially, all of the wastewater will leave the house, the water from the kitchen sink, the dishwasher, flushing the toilet, the shower, will leave the house, and the first step in the treatment train of a conventional septic system is it goes into a septic tank. And the septic tank is designed to allow solids in the waste to settle to the bottom of the tank, for fats and greases to rise to the top of the septic tank, and then a relatively clear zone of liquid to settle in the middle of the tank. Okay, from the tank, the wastewater is discharged to a drain field or a leach field through a distribution box. And what is moving ideally into that drain field is this relatively clear liquid after the solids settle and the fats and grease rise, okay? And so then that wastewater moves down through the soil, which is being shown in the slide example here in this sort of grayish zone of leachate moving down, or wastewater moving down through the soil profile, where the dry soil can do a little bit of removal of mostly bacteria, viruses, pathogens from the wastewater, okay? As that wastewater continues to percolate down through the soil, it moves down through where it can eventually actually reach the water table, the top of the groundwater layer, and then recharge the groundwater. So septic systems do a pretty good job of helping to distribute wastewater and manage wastewater. They do not do a good job in terms of treating gasoline, potentially household hazardous wastes, gasoline products, paint products, and disposal of household hazardous waste down the drain is not something that you want to do. Okay, only household wastewater is to go down the drain. I'll talk a little bit about methods for disposing of household hazardous waste, but it's super important that it stays out of the septic system. And so that it's not moving into your groundwater supply, where is also the same supply that is being used to supply your drinking water well. So in terms of well water protection, it's important that as a well owner, we learn where the well is located on our property. We think about and learn about what's going on around the well, the actual well head, what type of well we have, well water construction, what type of construction is the well. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to talk about that in just a couple minutes. And what do the water test results mean? So I'm going to talk a little bit about water testing and understanding what those water test results mean to help you to discern, are there any next steps, important steps in terms of protecting your drinking water well, what you can do in and around your own home, as well as potential next steps for water treatment if necessary. So where is the well located?
Alyson.
Yeah.
The last slide has not changed. We're still looking at the let's look at an example slide right now. Just wanted to let you know.
Okay, because I am, how about now? I did advance my slide.
I'm still looking at the same slide. Let's look at an example.
Okay.
Oh, now it's changed.
Okay, so there's a little bit of delay because I'm seeing the slides change. So thank you, Joe. And you can just, maybe you can just let me know that again if it happens.
Yes.
Please. Yeah, thank you. Because I'm seeing them advance. Okay, so let's take each one of those and just think about them, talk about them for a minute. So where is the well located in the yard? Okay, so just going out here, the well in this picture, the well is circled in red on the right-hand side of the slide, and taking, you know, kind of a view of thinking about where the well is. It's in the middle of, you know, the lawn, which actually can be a best practice that I'll get into in just a minute. But then I also think about, you know, what kind of lawn maintenance happens, you know, in this yard. Are fertilizers and pesticides applied? How close to the well are they applied? Have any well water test results indicated that perhaps fertilizers could be an issue? You know, are there nitrates in the drinking water well that may be elevated, in which, you know, lawn care fertilizing products could be getting into the well. I'm also noticing on the left-hand side that there's some cars parked, and there looks like there's a little, could be potential truck maintenance happening with the white truck in the driveway. It's up on cinder blocks. There's a tire off and that kind of thing. So where does car maintenance happen? How does lawn care or garden care happen? And in what's the proximity to that happening in the well? Taking a bird's eye view of this same location. So here's the well location, that red arrow is pointing to that same location in the neighborhood. We have a cul-de-sac. So perhaps it's not a busy road. Maybe it's not salted in the winter time to get rid of, you know, ice and snow. There looks like there's a little bit of construction happening. Is there a big development going in? Is there going to be more traffic? May there be de-icing materials applied to the road in the winter? Are all the neighbors on septic systems? You know, those sorts of things. It does look like a, you know, small residential neighborhood without a lot of traffic at this point, but it's nice to take a bird's eye view. In this particular example, there's no industry around in the example here, but what's it like on a bird's eye view in your neighborhood? And I'm not saying that in looking at that there is definitely going to be an issue in your well. I'm just asking you to think about any potentials, right? So when you're thinking about next steps and what to test for, and when was the last time you had your drinking water well tested, you may consider testing for some of the items that could be contributed by surrounding land uses. So there are some minimum setbacks for some potential sources of contamination from a private well. And these setbacks were developed for new well construction, okay? So I'm going to share some of those with you. And I know that I'm going to assume that most of us on the webinar tonight, we have a well. It's already installed. The setbacks, you know, may not ideally be met here. And so again, when we're talking and thinking about testing your private well, you can consider, you know, what to test for based on maybe some of the well's proximity to particular land uses. So what are these setbacks? 50 feet, the well is ideally 50 feet from a sewer line, because everybody who is on a well is not necessarily on their own septic system. Some people are on public sewers. Ideally 25 feet from the road, okay? And at one point, maybe the well was 25 feet from the road, but perhaps the road was widened to take care of, you know, increased density, population increase, and excuse me, increased road use. So it may no longer be from the road, 25 feet from the road surface. 50 feet from a septic tank. So that's that first part of the of a conventional septic system where all the solids settle out that I spoke about and the grease and fats rise. So 50 feet from that part of your septic system. and then 100 feet from your septic system drain field or leach field, and from animals. So here I'm showing a horse. I know we all don't have horses, but many of us might have dogs. And so where's the dog kennel? Okay. You know, does the dog access the well? Can the dog dig around the well? A number of years ago, I worked with a homeowner who had elevated levels of nitrate, which is a byproduct of human and animal waste, as well as fertilizer, nitrate in the well water. And I was asking him a series of questions about what was around the well and that sort of thing. And anyway, it turned out that his dog kennel, you know, the perimeter of the dog kennel not only enclosed the dog when the dog was outside, but it also enclosed the well. So the dog was in this area, and so was the well. We worked with this homeowner. He actually did move the dog kennel, and over a little bit of time, after some continual testing, we started to see the level of nitrates decrease in his well water, in the well water. So, so thinking about where animals are, your pets too, is really important. I mentioned earlier that low maintenance grass is actually best around the wellhead. Grass that requires, there are grass varieties out there that require minimum amount of fertilizers. Many of them are designed or bred to go dormant in the summertime. They have some natural properties that are bred into them to be naturally resistant to some common insects, pesticides pests that can affect the grass, eat their roots and those sorts of things. So low maintenance grass is best around the well. It also allows us to see the well, know where it's located. We don't lose sight of the fact that we have our own drinking water well. Decorative coverings, plants, installed around the well, and shrubs installed around the well that can hide the well, can also encourage animals to live and burrow near a well and to do some digging near the well. And so that can cause some problems. I've worked with many a homeowner where there's been some issues with rodents in wells and nesting around wells. And so it's nice to be able to have that visual, to be able to walk out to the well on a periodic basis and just visually inspect the well. And I'll give you a little homework assignment a little bit later in the presentation. And the weather has been so nice that having an outdoor homework assignment during COVID, when we're all cooped up in our homes, may be a welcome assignment for some of us. Okay, so what type of well do you have? Type of well construction. Let me go over a few of those, the three basic types of well construction, and give you a visual of what that looks like, particularly from the backyard, you know, from out the kitchen window. So a drilled well is drilled into the ground. It's drilled down into the bedrock. This is what it looks like from the yard. It's what you see is about a 6 or 8 inch metal casing coming up out of the ground that should be about 18 inches above the ground, so that well head, the top of the well, ideally does not flood during, you know, high storm events or during snow melt after a large snowstorm and that sort of thing. So you want to have that wellhead about 18 inches up above the ground. And then what you see to the left-hand side of that photograph is the electrical line that is running from the home underground and then into the well to run the submersible pump, which is sitting down in the well, okay? Drilled wells can be anywhere from, drilled into the bedrock. So as soon as the driller hits the bedrock and then goes down in. So you can have drilled wells that are 50 feet deep. My neighbor has a drilled well that's 450 feet deep. So it really depends on the amount of water that the well can produce. So it's the amount of groundwater, it's the gallons per minute that groundwater can yield to your home well that will help to dictate the depth of the well. The drilled well, the casing that you see here is about 18 feet in length, okay? It's gonna be 18 inches showing above the surface, and then it's gonna go down through the soil. The driller is gonna hit the bedrock and go an additional 5 feet into the bedrock and then seal this metal casing into the bedrock. Below that casing, your well is a drilled well is simply an open borehole that's 6 or 8 inches in diameter. And what it does.
I don't think the slide's advancing again. I'm sorry.
It seems to be for me. I can see it.
Okay.
Okay, it's just the drilled well. I thought you were starting to show the cross section of the well. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Thanks. The well is simply an open borehole below the casing, so that the water moving through the cracks in the bedrock can flow into that borehole and supply water into the well and then into your home. The second kind of well type is a driven well. Driven wells are driven by machine, typically, into sand and gravel deposits. Okay, so those are the deposits that sit atop the bedrock. So it's the sand and gravel. These, you'll notice that the plumbing that you're looking down into in this access pit is, the diameter is much smaller. So you're looking at about a 3-inch diameter wellhead pipe that's extending down into the sands and gravels. That pipe, that wellhead, will be the depth of the entire well. And at the bottom of that well will be a screen point. So sometimes a driven well is also referred to commonly as a point well. It's a similar kind of construction. And so then that lateral line, that horizontal line that you see running to the left in that photograph is the water line that's taking the water from the ground into your home. And in this particular case, the driven well, the point well, is sitting in an access riser. It's often put in an access riser just to protect it. It's a little more fragile in terms of the plumbing components than a drilled well is. And it may be harder to see. So it can oftentimes be within this access riser here, okay? It's typically also, because it's narrower, it can be, the plumbing, the wellhead can be a little bit narrower. Sand and gravel wells tend to be more productive than a drilled well in terms of gallons per minute. And so it's not always necessary to have a larger diameter storage unit like you do for a drilled well than with a driven well. And then finally, we have a dug well, which is about 3 feet in diameter. It's dug by machine these days. These types of wells are still installed. More historic properties with dug wells. Those wells most likely were dug by hand, lined with fieldstone. I've seen dug wells lined with brick material. Here it's precast concrete, and they're, you know, unlike a driven well, which might be 50, 75 feet in depth, a dug well can be anywhere, you know, from 10 to 50 feet in depth, depending again on where the top of the groundwater sits underground. So, you know, where's the water table, and then how productive is that groundwater resource. Dug wells are placed into sand and gravel deposits also. So what's important about well construction for any of these types of wells? The wellhead should be at least 18 inches above the ground. So that's true of any of them. The well cap is on tight and it's sealed to prevent rainwater from getting in, to prevent critters, insects from getting in. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. I've worked with homeowners who have, you know, where ants have gotten in and built a nest, hornets have gotten in and built a nest. And the issue that we often see in terms of water quality with those kinds of things, with insects and rodents, are bacteria. We see the presence of bacteria in well test results. Other important parts of well construction here is that the well casing or the plumbing, the piping that's going down into the ground is grouted with a watertight seal so that water can't sort of short circuit infiltrating down through the soil, but travel along the side of the well casing and just not benefit from some of the filtration properties that the soil will provide before the well gets recharged. That the well is located from potential pollution sources, as I spoke about earlier, and that the well driller submits a well completion report to the Rhode Island Department of Health and the homeowner. I have the question, need yours? You don't have it? The well completion report has information on it, such as location of the well in the yard, what the depth of the well is, who the well contractor was who installed it, the gallons per minute that it yields. And so if you don't have your well completion report, you can't find it, and you're interested in it, contact Grace Clancy at the Department of Health. There's her phone number. She will, Department of Health has any well completion report that was submitted to the state when it was supposed to be done. Grace has those, and she's, so she'll need your name, your address, including your town, because they've sorted them by town, and she'll look it up and she'll send you a copy. And if you have any questions, just get in touch with me and I'll help you through that process. Regulations for new well construction and existing well repair can be found at this website at ri.gov if you have any questions about new well construction and well repair. A little bit about new well construction in terms of drilling depths that I referred to earlier. So, and this is part of those regulations that I just mentioned on the previous slide. So there is a minimum well depth, as noted here on the right-hand side of this chart, that's based on how productive the well is in gallons per minute, what the well yield is. And so the higher the yield, the shallower the well can be. The lower the yield, the deeper the well construction is. And again, that comes back to allowing for there to be a reservoir in that well casing so that there's enough water available to a household during the busiest times of the day. when everybody gets up and is getting showered and having breakfast and making coffee and doing dishes. And then when everybody comes home and is doing the same things. So that's why this particular construction standard has been developed. I just wanted to show briefly this road cut that I came across recently that is now exposed, right? So it used to just be what was underground. With a new road going in, this was exposed, and it shows bedrock and it shows the fractures in the bedrock. I thought it was a nice example to show you that these are the fractures that the groundwater moves through underneath our feet, you know, and then into a drinking water well. So these fractures are not these big underground caves or large underground, you know, cracks in the rock that are moving volumes and volumes of water underground. They're tiny fractures where the groundwater can move through and replenish a drinking water well. If you're hiring a well contractor, if you need to hire a well contractor, they are now licensed through the Rhode Island Contractors and Licensing Board website. You want to make sure that the contractor that you're working with is licensed and insured, like any contractor that you may be hiring, a roofer or a plumber, etc. Well contractor would be the same kind of thing. As I mentioned, the Rhode Island Contractors Registration and Licensing Board website, you can simply Google it, will help you to discern, you know, the contractors that do have a current license. I'm going to shift gears for a couple of minutes and talk about well water testing. We talked about, you know, where's the well located, what's going on around the well in terms of land use, well water construction. And then people will often ask, you know, how do I know if my well water is safe to drink? And the answer to that is that it's important to do some testing. Groundwater quality in Rhode Island is typically excellent. It's very good. Many private well owners can drink their well water without any treatment or without any concern. But testing is important because there are areas where there can be issues, both naturally occurring or in some cases, you know, man-made chemicals that have been found in Rhode Island groundwater. So testing is important. The Department of Health created this schedule for Rhode Island private well owners. They broke it into a frequency across the top of the chart. The frequency here is every year. Test for these items that are in this column, you know, the every year column: bacteria, nitrate, nitrite, color, turbidity, chloride, and sodium. Okay. Chloride and sodium for both road salts, but since we're also, you know, working with this workshop for an island community, a coastal community, others of you may be joining us from coastal areas of Rhode Island. Chloride and sodium can also be an indication of whether or not there's salt water. If your well is close to the coast, whether or not there's any concern around saltwater intrusion, seawater getting into your drinking water well. So every year, the Department of Health suggests, nobody's making private well owners do this testing, test for these items. And then every 3 to 5 years, testing for the things that are listed under the 3 to 5 year column. So in the 3 to 5 year test, it's also assuming that you're doing the every year test, because the every year test is happening every year. And then every 3 to 5 years, you add on these additional items, which are really focused on two things. One, household plumbing, okay? You have tests in here that will help us discern if the water is corrosive, which can then lead toward minerals in the plumbing leaching into the water. So you have things in here that can be components of our plumbing, like lead if it's an older home, copper if it's a newer home, perhaps zinc if there's any plumbing components that are made from zinc. And then you also have some items in here that are naturally occurring in Rhode Island groundwater that can be both nuisance concerns or health concerns. So you'll see things here like iron and manganese, which is a common water quality nuisance in Rhode Island groundwater. You also see fluoride listed in here, which does occur naturally in some areas of Rhode Island. And so for childhood health, it's listed in the 3 to 5 year test. And then every 5 to 10 years, the Department of Health is suggesting that there be what's called a volatile organic compound scan, a VOC scan. And this is a scan that is done, and it looks at over 26 man-made chemicals like gasoline components, hobby chemicals, MTBE is included in that scan that can potentially get into groundwater. And I know that we all don't live near a gas station or a landfill where volatile organic compounds can be an issue, but we all do drive cars. Many of us mow our own lawns and store gasoline on our property. And so again, how we're using and disposing and storing these potentially hazardous chemicals can be of concern. The one thing about VOCs is that they often have an odor associated with them. So the other times to test, let me just, is if you ever notice a change in the taste, smell, or color of your water. And if that happens and you have questions about that, please call me. You can also call my colleague at the Department of Health, whose phone number was listed on the very first slide of the slide presentation, Shannon Nakama, on the title slide. So if you ever notice a change, give us a call and we'll lead you through a series of questions and help you discern about what to test for. There's also a couple of other tests for those, for people that the Department of Health recommends if you live in certain areas of the state. One of them is arsenic. If you live near an orchard or where there was historically an orchard, right, that maybe was now sold, the agricultural land was sold and now it's a housing development. And beryllium is a naturally occurring rare metal that does exist in the bedrock of these communities and areas of these communities, okay? And so those two items, arsenic and beryllium, are suggested to be added to a test if you live in certain areas of the state. And you might be scratching your head and say, well, how do I know? The Department of Health put together an online tool that works much like Google Maps works when you're trying to find your way to, you know, from point A to point B. Here's the website. You have this in your slide, copy of your slide presentation. I highlighted in red on the slide where you access the online tool to see if you should test for arsenic and or beryllium if they're recommended tests. You go to that online tool, you type in your address, and it will take you, it will zoom into your address, as well as give you a list of things to test for. And you'll see on that list, you know, whether or not arsenic is a yes, and beryllium is listed as yes, based on where you live. Okay. If you have any issues with using that tool of accessing or whatever, again, give me a call. I can do it in my office I can help you through it. I can also do it in my office for you on the phone, and we can go from there. Okay. As I mentioned, other times to test if the well has been flooded, very important, you know, for whether it was flooded by storm surge, hurricane, it's close to the coast. So a storm, flooded by snow melt, or, you know, torrential rains back when we had those. And last time that happened was what, in 2010, I think it was. And if ever you notice a change in the color, taste, or smell of your water, give me a call. I'll help you with that, or give my colleague Shannon Nakama a call. You want to test at a state certified laboratory. That's very important. I will share a list with that of those labs for you. They're going to give you, call them, tell them what you want to have tested for. You'll have to get the bottles from them, and they'll give you instructions. You'll carefully follow the instructions, take your sample. You have to take your sample back to the lab, and then the lab will simply send you your results, okay? I work with lots of private well owners who will email me a copy of their results if they have questions, and I will work with them to interpret their test results. I am a licensed interpreter. The Department of Health licensed interpreters and sample collectors, and I am a licensed sampler and a licensed interpreter. So I can do interpretation of test results and talk about next steps with you. Here's a list of the state certified laboratories. These are the ones that are listed that are close to, that are convenient to Rhode Island private well owners. I'll put that in quotations. In just a minute, I'm going to talk about some facilitated well testing kit distribution and pickup that will be part of this program, and I'll get to that in just a moment. And if you're not going to participate in that, here is a list of state certified laboratories for you. You know, you can call them or go to their website. During COVID, I have spoken recently to the labs, and during COVID, they do want you to call before you just arrive there, just to minimize, you know, contact, and to talk to you about what their safe practices are to do that minimization. It does cost money, yeah, to have your water tested. So here's some estimated testing costs. The annual test costs $95 at the State Health Lab. If you wanted to test for everything on that list that I shared with you earlier, the every year, the every 3 to 5, and the every 5 to 10 year, it costs you $410 at the Rhode Island State Health Lab. So there is a cost to that. There's private labs. You can shop around and see if you can, you know, get a better price. I work with the State Health Lab, and I know their prices, and their prices don't change. They're set by regulation, and so they rarely change. The private labs can be a little more competitive and a little more flexible in their pricing. There is a couple of instances in when well water testing is required by the state. It occurs when a new well goes in. There is required testing. It's everything on that list that I shared with you earlier, up to the 5 to 10 year test. And when testing is required when a home with a well is sold, okay? And in that situation, the buyer is responsible to test so that they get the test results from the laboratory. The lab has that responsibility with the tester. So if the buyer is the tester, the results go to the buyer. And the seller is responsible to disclose any previous well testing results over the years of owning the home. Okay, so there is that disclosure. This website link here will link directly to the Department of Health regulations and those requirements. A little bit about home water treatment before I talk about the facilitated well testing schedule, well testing piece of this program. I like to use the phrase test and talk before you treat. It's super important that you have your well water tested at a state certified lab. Get those results, interpret those results, and discern whether or not treatment is necessary. I work with lots and lots of private well owners to discuss them through to talk with them and guide them through the treatment process. What types of treatment technologies will help to address an issue, and how to be a good consumer, how to shop for water treatment systems. There's two basic kinds of treatment that I outline here. One is what is called point of use treatment. It's installed at a single tap, and it's treating only water from that tap, okay? Point of use. An example of a point of use treatment, in this case, I'm showing an activated carbon filter. Okay, it's only treating water from this faucet. Then there's whole house treatment, treating all of the water. It's installed in the basement, and it's treating all of the water after it leaves your pressure tank in your basement. That water would then move into your treatment system. Sometimes it's more than one system. It's sometimes what I call a treatment train to do whole house treatment. In this case, what you're looking at is number one is a sediment filter, and number two is a water softener. Water softeners are typically used in Rhode Island to remove iron and manganese, which, as I mentioned earlier, are common minerals that can be a nuisance for Rhode Island private well owners. Okay, not a health concern, but a nuisance. Here's your homework. Learn about your well. And one of the things to do about learning about your well is tomorrow go out to your well and stand at it and take a look at what's happening around your well. You know, what's happening 5 feet from the well, what's happening 10 feet from the well, what's happening 15 feet from the well. Previously, we looked at a slide that showed, you know, some recommended distances of the well from some common land uses in residential areas like septic systems, leach fields, and roadways and those kinds of things. So look and see what those distances are. You know, what's close, what could potentially contribute sources of contamination to your well water. To the best of our ability, we can protect and keep pollution away from the well. Properly use, store, and dispose of household chemicals. Make sure any new well is properly sited, and seal any unused well, any abandoned well on the property. Having a contractor properly seal that off from being a conduit down to the groundwater system. Have the water tested, follow the well testing schedule. You know, if you haven't tested the water in a number of years, I always suggest to a homeowner, get yourself on the schedule. Start at least with the annual water test. Start there and then, you know, move from there. but start somewhere. Act, call or email us. I'm happy to help you. The Rhode Island Department of Health is a great resource also. So we are here to help. This is part of what our program services to Rhode Island private well owners. You have in your slides the Eco Depot schedule for properly disposing of household hazardous waste for this calendar year. You need to go online and make an appointment, so you can choose, one that is of convenience to you. There's no off mainland sites, unfortunately, but maybe you can coincide Eco Depot drop off with other errands on the mainland that you may have over the course of 2021. Let me talk a little bit about the well testing follow-up that's going to be available to participants in this workshop. And I really want to thank George and Valerie for making this happen for folks out on Block Island. And we're also doing a portion of this here on the mainland. So we are going to make test kits, an order form for test kits available from the Rhode Island State Health Lab. And you are going to be able to go online at this URL that's listed on the slide to request a kit. You'll put in your name. It's going to ask you for information that we'll need in order to communicate with you, and also to place our order for the kit for the Rhode Island State Health Lab. So you're going to put in your name, your phone number, your email, and which kit you want. The annual kit, the 3 to 5 year kit, or the 5 to 10 year kit. We are then going to put that order into the State Health Lab, and they're going to put those kits together. And within, several days to 5 working days, they are going to put those kits together, and we are going to be able to pick them up. Valerie is going to pick them up for Block Island. She's going to bring the ordered kits, the kits that you've ordered, to the island for you to pick up and take home and collect your sample. And then at a designated time, that will be returned to Valerie on Block Island. And she is graciously going to take them, your samples, your paperwork, and your check for payment to the State Health Lab for delivery for testing. And then the State Health Lab will send you, the homeowner, the well owner, your test results. We don't get those at all. You get those directly. Okay, so that's for Block Island. That is just a very welcome service for Valerie, for the Block Island Maritime Institute to offer to Block Island residents. At URI, we are going to make, you're going to be able to order if you're on the mainland and you want to pick up a test kit at URI because you're down here and it's convenient. You can order it. We'll through this website, we'll pick it up for you at the State Health Lab, and it will be available for you to pick up here at URI. And you will need to return it yourself to the State Health Lab. We will not be collecting those kits and taking them back to Providence for you, but you can do that yourself, at your convenience. And all of this, once you do the ordering and once we know when we're going to be able to get the kits from the State Health Lab, Joe is going to send you an email with all of the details for Block Islanders of where you can pick your, where and when you can pick your kit up from Valerie, and when you would return that kit to Valerie. And for people on the mainland picking them up at URI, when you can pick your kit up at URI. So all of that will come out in an email to you, over the next several days, once we know the State Health Lab's timetable for getting the kits to us. So again, you know, if you have any questions, you can ask. But we will follow up with an email once we get your order. There is a deadline for ordering. So we ask that you order by tomorrow evening. Is it 8 o'clock, Joe?
Yes.
Tomorrow at 8 o'clock. So we're giving you 24 hours to put your order in for us so that this doesn't linger on for weeks on our end. So if you want to take part in this, then put your order in for a kit, okay? And we'll get it for you, and then you'll be able to pick it up. I want to say thank you for joining us. I know we might have a couple questions. We're a little bit over. We can see how the questions run. Sign up for a kit. Here it is listed here again. And then you're going to also, in a couple of days, get an email from Joe about filling out an evaluation. Tell us how we did tonight. Give us any suggestions. We read your suggestions and we make changes based on what our audience tells us. And appropriate, you know, constructive criticism is always welcome. So with that, I want to thank you. And I'll just end with this slide with the contacts, myself and my colleague, and we can open up for questions for a few minutes.
Would you like me to read some of the questions that have come up in the chat?
Yeah, if there's ones that weren't addressed during the slide presentation, Joe, or you know, something that needs clarification, that would be helpful. And maybe we could do like about 5 minutes of questions. Does that sound good for Joe and Valerie?
Yep, there's about 5 or 6 questions here, so I think we could probably fit it in. So one question just asks about how far away from the wellhead ground activity, like fertilizing, shouldn't happen. So like, can you do it, like how far away from that wellhead? Can you do it anywhere in the yard, kind of thing?
Yeah, so I'll say the farthest away, the better. Thinking about gardening, you know, usually what we see that can be one of the biggest impacts of fertilizer in terms of the wellhead is right around the wellhead, within 10 feet, 15 feet of the wellhead. Also looking at, you know, good lawn care practices that can minimize, you know, fertilizers. There are some low impact grass varieties that require lower fertilizers, less water, and then also proper fertilizing, when to put that fertilizer on the lawn. And I have some information on my website around that, and I can make that available to folks on the you know, that have been on the presentation in terms of best management practices for lawn fertilization. But, you know, not filling the fertilizer spreader right next to the wellhead, so to prevent any spilling of fertilizer right next to the wellhead, and keeping the application away, and not, you know, like I said, 10 to 15 feet away from the wellhead, and not over fertilizing. So fertilizing, you know, when the law, you know, in terms of the best practices that our URI Cooperative Extension Master Gardener Program advocates.
Okay, and a follow-up on that, how far from that wellhead could you do some kind of composting?
Yeah, I keep that, you know, a good distance away. Also, I would say as far as you can, keep it away. If you're limited, especially depending on what you're composting, like if you're composting animal waste, you know, you want to make sure that that animal waste is as far away from the wellhead as possible. You might also consider, if it's animal waste, to have it in a covered area so that rain can't, precipitation can't get on it and then make it move towards your wellhead, so there's no travel of potential, compost waste towards the wellhead. And I'm not talking about the scraps that are in the compost. I'm talking about the nutrients that are being accumulated in the compost pile, particularly, say, nitrates, nitrogen that could potentially dissolve in rainwater or snow melt and move towards that wellhead. So you want to keep the compost and any sort of overland runoff towards the well as far away and diverted from your wellhead as you can.
If you have an unused well, who would seal that?
Yeah, good. A registered contractor. You'd want to work with a registered contractor. They're going to, remove any of the mechanicals that are in there. They're going to appropriately fill it with concrete, take out any plumbing, and then, cap it. So work with a registered licensed well driller for that.
If you haven't tested your water in 5 years, which kit do you recommend?
Well, like I said, I encourage people to get on the schedule. The more you test for, the more it costs. So, if you can do the 3 to 5 year kit, which would be the annual and the 3 to 5 year. So that's the assumption that's happening when you order a 3 to 5 year kit. If cost is a factor, start there with the annual. The annual test, the annual test kit at the department. Here are the prices for the Department of Health's test kits. $95 for the annual, $285, I believe. Sorry if I'm missing, I'm not quite on the money with this, but I'm pretty sure it's $285 for the 3 to 5 year, and it's $410 for everything for the 5 to 10. The volatile organic compounds. Okay, so there's a ballpark for you.
Let's see. All right, let's go. That's most of it. Let's go one more. How is it determined what type of well they'll drill on a property? Like if it's a drilled well or a driven well, or how would that be determined?
Yeah, it's going to be excellent. It's going to be determined by the geology. It's going to be determined by the geology, and so it's if and also drillers work in certain areas, and so they also know the geology of certain areas, and they know that they're in West Greenwich, they're putting in most areas in West Greenwich, for example, they're putting in drilled wells because we don't have a lot of sand and gravel deposits in most of the town. So they're working mostly with bedrock. So they're putting in a drilled well into the bedrock, or sometimes those wells are pounded by machine rather than rotary drilled. They're pounded with like a drill bit, but it's a pounding. And then if there's sand and gravel deposits, which there are plentiful deposits of sand and gravel in southern Rhode Island, on Block Island is rich in sand and gravel deposits, and they're deep deposits that can store a lot of groundwater. Then you're looking at driven well construction, right? Or dug well construction, which is a little less typical construction going in these days. So it's dictated by geology.
All right, one last follow-up. Does the 5 to 10 kit include everything in the other kits?
The 5 to, yes, it does. Yes.
All right, I think that is pretty sufficient for the chat here.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate this, your attendance. Thanks for the few minutes that we went over. Take advantage of the kit ordering if you're so inclined. If you have any questions, as I mentioned, we are available to help. And so phone or email works terrific, and I do get back to people. So Valerie, George, would you like to take over and wrap up? Or
Yes. Oh, I think I'm on now. Oh, no, I'm not.
there you are.
Now I am. Okay. Alyson, thank you. And thank you, Joe, so much. That was extremely informative. This is the second time I've heard, and I learned some more things this time. And I can't wait to get my well water tested. Actually, I'm a little bit scared of doing it, but I think I need to. It's been way too long. So again, thank you so much for putting on this workshop, and thanks for Valerie for helping me through it on this end. And for anyone that hasn't gotten the information from Joe yet, believe me, your email has been registered and he will get the slideshow to you and all the information. Some of you that registered today just didn't have a chance to get that from Joe so far, but hang in there. We have you, and we will be getting you the information. And your interest is very well appreciated. Thank you so much. And I guess that's it for us tonight.
Okay.
Until next time.
Till next time.
Until next time. Thank
All
you.
right.
And thank you everyone for joining us. Bye-bye.